Hello and a massive welcome to all you CMA students joining us for this explainer. If you're gearing up for those upcoming written exams, you are in exactly the right place. Today, we're putting a laser focus on the Code on Wages. We're going to break down Section 19 on fines, Section 20 on deductions for absence, and those absolutely crucial provisions surrounding annual bonuses. You know, these are the exact areas where examiners just love to test your precision, so we're going to make sure you have these rules completely locked down.
Okay, let's dive into this. Here is your exact exam syllabus roadmap. First up, Section 19 covering fines, then Section 20 on absence deductions. After that, we'll hit the annual bonus rules and wrap it all up with your key exam takeaways. Starting right off with Section 19, the law of fines. Now, an employer can't just arbitrarily fine you because they feel like it. The law actually acts as a strict protective shield here. In fact, it's so strict, you really need to treat these 3 prerequisites as your absolute checklist for the exam. Before a single rupee can be legally fined, the employer has to jump through 3 hoops. First, the specific acts and omissions that trigger a fine, they need prior approval from the appropriate government or prescribed authority. Second, a notice listing those exact acts has to be prominently exhibited right there on the work premises. And third, and this is absolutely crucial, you can't fine an employee without giving them a formal opportunity to show cause against it. If your exam scenario skips literally any of these steps, that fine is completely illegal. So, the crucial point is the mathematical limit on these fines. Section 19 explicitly caps the penalty. The total fine in any single wage period absolutely cannot exceed 3% of the wages payable to the employee for that period. To put that into perspective for your exam, if a worker, let's call him Rahul, earns 10,000 rupees in a given wage period, the absolute maximum fine his boss can impose is 300 rupees. Not a single rupee more. Now, here's a massive exam tip for you. When you are sitting in that exam hall, you are highly likely to see a trick question that looks exactly like this. Can an employer deduct a fine in 3 monthly installments to, make it easier on the worker? Take a quick second to think about how the law views that. Well, the definitive answer is no way, absolutely not. Section 19 explicitly prohibits recovering fines by installments. The employer has to recover the whole thing in a single shot. On top of that, the fine cannot be recovered after 90 days from the day it was imposed. It's totally a use it or lose it window for the employer. And when you're tracking this legal timeline, there's one critical rule you've got to remember. Day 0 is the actual day the act or omission happened. The clock starts ticking immediately right then, not a week later when HR finally processes the paperwork. If 90 days pass from that initial act, the employer's right to recover the fine completely expires. Now pay super close attention to this number, 15. The law draws a really hard line when it comes to age. Under absolutely no circumstances can you fine an employee who is under the age of 15 years. It's a blanket exemption, so definitely make sure you highlight that in your notes. And finally, for Section 19, what actually happens to the fine money? Well, it definitely doesn't become extra profit for the boss. The law requires all fines to be recorded in a prescribed register. But more importantly, that money can only be spent on things that actually benefit the employees in the establishment, as approved by the prescribed authority. Basically, the money stays within the worker community. All right, Section 20, deductions for absence from duty. We are shifting gears smoothly now from disciplinary fines to wage deductions that are based purely on attendance. The absolute fundamental rule of Section 20 is proportionality. Deductions can only be made for the exact time an employee is absent from where they are contractually supposed to work. The math here is really straightforward. The deduction can't be a larger proportion than the period of absence compared to the total wage period. Simply put, if you miss exactly half a day's work, the employer can only deduct half a day's wages, nothing more. It's a strict 1-to-1 ratio. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is the legal definition of absence. It isn't just about staying home in bed. According to the explanation in Section 20, you are legally deemed absent if you are physically present at the workplace, but you refuse to carry out your work. This specifically includes participating in a stay-in strike or just refusing to work for any unreasonable cause. So yeah, just clocking in does not save you from a deduction if you refuse to do your actual job. Which brings us to a really intense scenario. What happens if 10 or more employees go on a sudden strike without giving due notice? Imagine a group of workers acting together, in concert, to just halt work without any reasonable cause. Well, in that specific scenario, 10 or more people acting in concert, the proportionality rule gets a massive exception. the employer is legally allowed to deduct an amount not exceeding 8 days of wages in lieu of notice. It's a severe penalty clause designed to deter illegal, unannounced strikes. For example, if those workers strike illegally for just 2 days, the boss can legally dock up to 8 days' worth of wages from their pay. It's a really prime candidate for a multiple choice question, so keep that number 8 in your head.
Moving on to Part 3, Annual Bonus Entitlements. Now remember, these rules are incredibly number heavy, which makes them absolutely perfect for objective exam questions.
And this brilliantly illustrates the two extreme boundaries of the statutory bonus spectrum side by side. On one end, we have the absolute minimum floor, and on the other, the maximum ceiling. You really need to memorize this range. Let's drill into that minimum first. Eligible employees whose wages don't exceed a specific government-notified amount are entitled to an annual minimum bonus. This is calculated at exactly 8.33% of their earned wages, or 100 rupees, whichever is higher. And here is the absolutely critical detail for your exam. This minimum must be paid regardless of whether the employer actually made a profit or had an allocatable surplus that year. It's a guaranteed statutory right.
On the flip side, what if the company performs incredibly well? Well, if there are gross profits to distribute, the bonus obviously goes up, but it is strictly capped. The absolute maximum bonus an employee can legally receive is 20% of their annual wages. Even if the company's profits are completely astronomical, the statutory bonus ceiling stops right there at that 20% mark.
Plus, keep the math in mind here. When distributing this part of the gross profits, it has to be proportional to the annual wages of the employee. Higher annual wages mean a proportionally larger slice of the bonus pool, though obviously still restricted by that 20% ceiling we just talked about.
Section 4, Key Exam Takeaways. Let's move to and see how this builds into some rapid-fire memory hooks for you.
We've covered a ton of dense legal ground today. Take a mental snapshot of this rule of numbers cheat sheet right now. Let's run through it with high energy. Fines, maximum 3% of wages. Age limit, absolutely no fines for anyone under 15 years old. The expiry, 90 days and absolutely no installments. Sudden strikes by 10 or more people, up to an 8-day wage penalty. And those bonus boundaries, 8.33% minimum to a 20% maximum. Seriously, lock these figures in for your written exam.
If you're gearing up for your written exams, you already know that statutory compliance goes way beyond just memorizing a list of rules. It's really about deeply understanding the financial and operational mechanics that keep a business running legally. So today, we are taking an exciting, highly focused dive into the Code on Wages. Think of this explainer as your personal masterclass. We're going to break down exactly how the law dictates working hours, overtime wages, and those super strict payment timelines. By the end of this, we're going to make these mechanisms absolute second nature to you. Here is our syllabus for today. We're going to look at the normal working day, the exceptions to the rules, calculating overtime wages, modes and wage periods, and finally, the timely payment of wages.
Okay, let's dive into this. Section 1, the normal working day. We have to establish our baseline first. So, when the minimum rates of wages have been fixed under the code, the appropriate government has the power to fix the number of hours that actually make up a normal working day. But pay close attention here, because the legal definition is inclusive of one or more specified intervals. It's not literally just the hours spent actively sweating on the factory floor. Those intervals are a baked-in part of the statutory framework. On top of that, the government provides for a mandated day of rest in every period of 7 days. This applies to all employees or any specified class of employees. A legal working week absolutely, fundamentally includes this guaranteed rest.
Now, you might be wondering, what happens if an employer really needs a worker to come in on that designated day of rest? Well, look at this exact statutory phrase straight from the code. The crucial takeaway here is that working on a rest day acts as a major financial trigger. The government mandates that the remuneration for work done on this rest day must be paid at a rate not less than the overtime rate. It's basically a built-in penalty for disrupting the employee's legal time off. And honestly, it's a brilliant mechanism to ensure fair compensation.
Moving right along to Section 2, Exceptions to the Rules. The examiners love to test this. When do standard working hours simply not apply?
The code actually outlines 5 specific scenarios where the normal working day provisions apply, but only subject to prescribed conditions. We've got employees engaged in unforeseen or unpreventable emergencies. We have those doing preparatory or complementary work, like setting up heavy machinery, work that just has to happen outside general limits. Then there's employment that is essentially intermittent. We also have work that, for purely technical reasons, absolutely has to be completed before the duty is over. And finally, work dependent on the irregular action of natural forces. Think about agriculture or maritime work, where you are totally at the mercy of unpredictable weather and tides. As a CMA, your job is verifying these specific conditions are actually met before exempting any role from standard hours. Let's look a little closer at what is probably the trickiest definition on that list, essentially intermittent. The government declares employment as intermittent when the daily hours of duty normally include periods of inaction. Basically, the employee is technically on duty, but they aren't called upon to display either physical activity or sustained attention. And this brilliantly illustrates the classic example of a night watchman. They are on duty for sure, they are present at the facility, but their shift inherently includes long periods of just inaction. This specific statutory classification fundamentally changes how their normal working hours are regulated. All right, Section 3, calculating overtime wages. Let's get into the real financial impact here.
So here is the million-dollar compliance question for you. What exact penalty is triggered when an employee exceeds those normal working hours? If their minimum wage is fixed by the hour, by the day, or by a longer prescribed period, how do you legally compensate that extra time?
Here is the comparison you absolutely need to memorize. Section 14 creates a strict, heavy obligation on the employer. For every single hour, or actually even part of an hour, worked in excess of the normal working day, the employer shall pay the employee at the overtime rate. And what is that rate? It shall not be less than twice the normal rate of wages. No exceptions. It is a mandatory, non-negotiable premium. Just lock this 2x multiplier in your mind for exam day. Let's do some super quick mental math. If the normal rate of wages is fixed at 100 rupees an hour, any hour or fraction of an hour worked beyond the normal working day has to be compensated at a minimum of 200 rupees. As a future management accountant, you are going to be auditing payrolls, and verifying this 2x compliance is going to be your bread and butter. Section 4, modes and wage periods. Let's explore exactly how this administrative execution happens. Under Section 15, the law gets very, very specific about how you can actually pay people. All wages shall be paid in current coin, currency notes, by check, by crediting the bank account of the employee, or by electronic mode. But, and this is a big but, be aware of a critical provision here. The appropriate government can actually issue a notification specifying that for certain industrial establishments, employers are legally required to pay wages strictly by check or direct bank credit, meaning the cash option is completely taken off the table. It's a fantastic mechanism designed to ensure total financial transparency. Now, Section 16 deals with fixing the wage period itself. Employers do have some wiggle room here. They can fix wage periods as daily, weekly, fortnightly, or monthly. You can even have different wage periods fixed for different establishments within the exact same company. But the law sets a hard, undeniable ceiling. You cannot have a quarterly wage period. Legally, 1 month is the absolute limit. No wage period in respect of any employee shall be more than a single month. Period.
Okay, Section 5, timely payment of wages. What's really interesting about this next part is the exact chronological deadlines you need to commit to memory.
Let's chunk these timelines into logical pairs so you can easily recreate this whole matrix during your written exam. For the shorter periods, payment is essentially immediate. If the wage period is daily, payment is due right at the end of the shift. Done. If it's weekly, it's due on the last working day of the week, right before their weekly holiday. Now let's look at the longer periods, where the law gives a slight administrative buffer. For a fortnightly basis, payment has to be made before the end of the second day after the fortnight ends. And for a monthly basis, wages must be paid out before the expiry of the 7th day of the succeeding month. Pretty logical, right? But wait, there is a massive exception to these standard wage periods that you absolutely must know. What happens during an employment separation? Whether an employee is removed, dismissed, retrenched, resigns, or, and this is a big one, becomes unemployed just because the establishment itself closes down, in those cases, the standard weekly or monthly deadlines? Throw them right out the window. If an establishment unexpectedly closes its doors on a Tuesday, standard monthly deadlines just vanish. Under Section 17, those wages must be paid out within 2 working days. It's a strict, accelerated deadline designed specifically to protect the outgoing employee, and it overrides everything else. The rest of the points on wage deductions will be covered in our next explainer,